Sarah wiped down the sticky table for the third time that evening, her uniform stained with coffee and the remnants of someone's forgotten dinner. The fluorescent lights above cast harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floor of Miller's Diner, a place that had seen better days decades ago. She'd been working here for 2 years now, ever since she dropped out of college when her father's medical bills started piling up like autumn leaves. "Hey, coffee girl?" The voice belonged to Marcus Chen, the diner's owner, a man whose belly strained against his too tight polo shirts and whose idea of employee motivation involved public humiliation. "Table 6 is still waiting for their check. What are you doing, writing a novel over there?" Sarah bit her tongue and hurried to table 6, where a businessman in an expensive suit sat scrolling through his phone. As she placed the check on his table, she couldn't help but notice the real estate documents spread before him. Her eyes caught glimpses of property valuations, investment portfolios, and business acquisition papers. "Excuse me," she said quietly, "are you in real estate?" The man looked up with mild annoyance. "Property development. Why?" "I was just curious about the business. I've always been interested in—" "Sweetheart," he interrupted with a patronizing smile, "stick to pouring coffee. The restaurant business isn't for people like you. These numbers would make your head spin." He gathered his papers with exaggerated care, as if protecting state secrets from prying eyes. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she maintained her composure. "Of course, sir, thank you for coming in." As she walked away, she heard him chuckling to his companion on the phone. "Yeah, the waitress here thinks she understands business. Cute, right? Some people just don't know their place." That night, Sarah sat in her cramped studio apartment with a stack of library books about business management, accounting, and restaurant operations. She'd been secretly studying for months, using every spare moment between shifts to educate herself. The businessman's dismissive words echoed in her mind, but instead of discouraging her, they fueled a fire that had been smoldering for too long. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Jenny. "Still coming to drinks tomorrow? You need to get out more." Sarah stared at the message for a long moment before typing back, "Can't, working a double and studying afterward." "You're killing yourself with this job." "It's just serving tables." Just serving tables. The words stung because they came from someone who supposedly cared about her. Sarah set down her phone and opened her laptop, navigating to the online business courses she'd been taking in secret. She had already completed modules on financial planning, customer service excellence, and supply chain management. Her grades were perfect, but more importantly, she was beginning to see patterns and opportunities that others missed. The next morning brought the usual chaos of the breakfast rush. Sarah moved with practiced efficiency, but her mind was elsewhere, calculating food costs and analyzing customer flow patterns. She noticed that the diner's busiest hours coincided with the highest waste production, that certain menu items sat untouched while others flew out of the kitchen, and that the staff scheduling seemed designed for maximum inefficiency rather than customer satisfaction. "Sarah," Marcus's voice cut through the morning chatter, "stop daydreaming and take care of the Gordon party. They've been waiting 10 minutes. The Gordon party consisted of 3 middle-aged women who came in every Tuesday for their book club breakfast. Sarah knew their orders by heart: 2 egg white omelets with spinach, 1 stack of pancakes with extra syrup, and a pot of decaf coffee that would need refilling at least 3 times. "Good morning, ladies," Sarah said with genuine warmth. "The usual?" "You're a treasure, dear," said Mrs. Gordon, the group's unofficial leader. "I don't know how you remember everyone's preferences." "It's easy when you care about the customers," Sarah replied, stealing a glance at Marcus, who was berating a new server for forgetting to stock napkins. "You know," Mrs. Gordon continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "my husband mentioned that this place might be going up for sale soon. Marcus has been struggling to keep up with the rent increases." Sarah's heart skipped. "Really?" "Harold works at the bank, you see. He mentioned that Marcus came in asking about loan extensions. Between you and me, I think he's in over his head." Mrs. Gordon patted Sarah's hand. "You should think about finding a backup plan, sweetheart. A smart girl like you could do so much more than this." As the morning wore on, Sarah found herself studying the diner with new eyes. Despite its shabby appearance and Marcus's poor management, The location was prime real estate in a gentrifying neighborhood. The bones of the building were solid, and the customer base, while not thriving, was loyal. With the right vision and proper management, this place could be transformed into something special. During her break, Sarah called Jenny, who worked as a loan officer at First National Bank. "Jen, I need a favor. Can you look into the financial status of Miller's Diner, specifically any loans or mortgages attached to the property? Why would you want to know about that dump? Just humor me, please." 20 minutes later, Jenny called back with information that made Sarah's pulse quicken. Marcus owed nearly $200,000 in various loans and was 3 months behind on his mortgage payments. The property itself was valued at $450,000, but given the circumstances, the bank was preparing to foreclose. "Sarah, what's this about?" "You're scaring me. I'm thinking about making an offer." The silence on the other end lasted so long that Sarah thought the call had dropped. "You're joking, right? With what money, and why would you want to buy that place? It's a sinking ship." "I've been saving, Jen, every penny for 2 years. And I've been learning about the business. I know I can turn it around." "Saving from a waitress salary? How much could you possibly have?" $47,000. Another silence. "That's not even close to enough for a down payment, and even if it were, no bank would give you a loan. You don't have the credit history or the business experience." Sarah had expected this response, but it still stung. "Thanks for the information, Jen. I'll figure something out." That evening, as she cleaned tables after closing time, Sarah overheard Marcus on the phone in his office. The conversation was heated, filled with pleas and promises about payment schedules. When he emerged, his face was red with stress and defeat. "Sarah, I need to talk to you," he said, his usual bombast replaced by weary resignation. They sat in a booth that had seen countless conversations, confessions, and confrontations over the years. "I'm losing this place," Marcus said without preamble. "The bank is going to foreclose next month. I thought I should give you and the other staff a heads up so you can start looking for new jobs." Sarah felt her moment arriving. What if someone wanted to buy it from you directly, before the foreclosure? Marcus laughed bitterly. Who would want this headache? And even if someone did, they'd need serious money. I owe too much for anyone to make a reasonable offer. What would you consider reasonable? Marcus studied her face, perhaps seeing something there he'd never noticed before. Why are you asking? Because I want to buy it. The laugh that escaped Marcus was sharp and cruel. You? Sarah, you're a waitress. A good one, but still just a waitress. You couldn't possibly have the kind of money needed for something like this. How much would you take to walk away clean? Marcus's expression shifted from amusement to curiosity. $250,000 would cover my debts and give me enough to start over somewhere else. But that's fantasy money for someone in your position. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Give me 1 week. Sarah, I appreciate the thought, but 1 week, Marcus. If I can't come up with a real offer by then, you proceed with whatever plans you have. Marcus shrugged, figuring there was no harm in humoring her. Sure, kid, 1 week. Sarah spent that night making phone calls and sending emails she'd been preparing for months. The first call went to her Aunt Patricia, her father's sister who had built a successful catering business from nothing and had always encouraged Sarah's ambitions. Aunt Pat, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to hear me out completely before you respond. Of course, honey. What's going on? Sarah explained her situation, her savings, her education, and her plan. She outlined the diner's potential, the neighborhood's growth trajectory, and her detailed business plan for turning the failing restaurant into a thriving community hub. You've really thought this through, Patricia said when Sarah finished. Send me your business plan. I want to see the numbers. The next call went to her former economics professor, Dr. Martinez, who had always said she had a natural aptitude for business analysis. He agreed to review her financial projections and serve as a reference for her loan application. By Thursday, Sarah had assembled a coalition of supporters that surprised even her. Patricia agreed to co-sign a loan and contribute $20,000 toward the down payment. Dr. Martinez connected her with a small business loan program designed for women entrepreneurs. Jenny, despite her initial skepticism, helped Sarah navigate the loan application process and even agreed to expedite the approval. Friday morning brought a meeting with the bank's small business lending department. Sarah wore her best dress and carried a folder thick with documentation. Her business plan, financial projections, letters of recommendation, and proof of her savings and backing. The loan officer, Mr. Thompson, was initially skeptical. "Ms. Rodriguez, your work history shows consistent employment, but it's all in the service industry. Do you have any management experience?" "I've been effectively managing customer relations, inventory awareness, and workflow optimization for 2 years," Sarah replied confidently. "I may not have had the title, but I've been doing the work." She proceeded to detail her observations about the diner's operations, her plans for menu optimization, cost reduction strategies, and customer experience improvements. She spoke about the neighborhood's demographic trends, the lack of quality dining options in the area, and her vision for creating a community gathering place that honored the diner's history while embracing its future potential. Mr. Thompson's demeanor shifted as Sarah presented her case. Her preparation was thorough, her passion evident, and her understanding of the business deeper than many entrepreneurs with formal business degrees. "Ms. Rodriguez, I have to say, this is one of the most comprehensive presentations I've seen from a first-time business owner. Your projections are realistic, your market analysis is sound, and your financial backing is solid." Sarah's heart pounded as she waited for the verdict. "I'm prepared to approve a loan for $200,000, contingent on your aunt's co-signature and the completion of a building inspection." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes, but she maintained her composure. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. You won't regret this decision." That afternoon, she walked into Miller's Diner for what would be one of her last shifts as an employee. Marcus was behind the counter, looking more defeated than usual. "Marcus, do you have a few minutes to talk?" He glanced around the nearly empty restaurant. "Sure, Sarah. Let me guess. You found another job?" "Actually, I found $250,000. Marcus stopped wiping the counter and stared at her. "What?" Sarah placed the loan approval letter and her aunt's check on the counter between them. "I told you I wanted to buy this place. I meant it." Marcus picked up the documents with shaking hands, reading them twice before the reality sank in. Where did this come from?" "Hard work, planning, and people who believe in me," Sarah said simply. "Do we have a deal?" The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of paperwork, inspections, and legal procedures. Sarah continued working her shifts while simultaneously preparing for ownership, a surreal experience that felt like living in 2 different realities. On her last day as an employee, the lunch rush was particularly brutal. A large tour group had descended on the diner, overwhelming the kitchen and leaving the servers scrambling. Sarah moved through the chaos with practiced ease, but she couldn't help thinking about all the changes she would implement to prevent such organizational disasters. The businessman from her first week was back, seated at his usual table with another client. As Sarah approached to take their order, she overheard him saying, "This place is perfect for our needs. The location is prime, and once we tear down this eyesore, we can build something that actually generates real revenue." "Excuse me," Sarah interrupted politely. "I couldn't help but overhear. Are you planning to buy this property?" The businessman looked up with the same condescending expression she remembered. "Oh, it's you again. Still daydreaming about business, I see." He turned to his client. "This is what I was telling you about. The service industry really attracts a certain type." Sarah smiled serenely. "Actually, I wanted to let you know that the property is no longer available. It was purchased earlier this week." "By whom?" the businessman asked, suddenly interested. "By me." The man's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally, uncomfortable recognition. "That's not possible." Sarah reached into her apron and pulled out a business card she'd had printed that morning. "Sarah Rodriguez, owner and general manager, Miller's Diner. Or, as it will be known starting next week, Rodriguez Family Restaurant." She placed the card on the table between the 2 men, who stared at it as if it might disappear. "Gentlemen, I hope you'll consider dining with us again once we reopen. I think you'll find the service much improved." Sarah turned and walked away, leaving the businessman speechless for perhaps the first time in his professional life. The official transfer of ownership took place on a crisp Monday morning in October. Sarah signed the final papers in the lawyer's office, with Marcus looking simultaneously relieved and bewildered by the turn of events. "You know, Sarah," Marcus said as they shook hands, "I never thought you had it in you. I guess I was wrong about a lot of things." "We all have our strengths, Marcus. Yours was keeping this place running when times were tough. Mine is seeing what it could become." That afternoon, Sarah stood alone in her restaurant for the first time. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting the same harsh shadows, but everything felt different. This wasn't just a place where she worked anymore. It was her vision, her responsibility, her future. She walked through the dining room, envisioning new paint colors, updated lighting, and comfortable seating that would encourage customers to linger. The kitchen would need new equipment, and the menu would require a complete overhaul. It was an enormous amount of work, but for the first time in years, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. "Saw the article in the business section about the sale. I can't believe you actually did it. I'm sorry, I doubted you." The article Jenny referenced was a small piece in the local paper about a local waitress becomes restaurant owner. The headline made Sarah smile. Yesterday she was just a waitress. Today she was a business owner. Tomorrow she would be whatever she chose to become. As she locked up her restaurant and walked to her car, Sarah thought about all the people who had underestimated her, who had tried to define her limits, who had assumed that her current circumstances represented her ultimate potential. They weren't malicious, most of them. They simply couldn't see beyond the uniform and the coffee pot to the mind that was always calculating, always planning, always growing. But that was their limitation, not hers. And now, as she drove home to plan the grand reopening of Rodriguez Family Restaurant, Sarah Rodriguez knew that she would never again let anyone else define what she was capable of achieving. The transformation of the restaurant would take 3 months, but the transformation of Sarah had been years in the making. It just took buying her own restaurant for everyone else to finally see what she had known all along. 3 weeks into the renovation, Sarah stood in the gutted dining room surrounded by paint samples, fabric swatches, and the controlled chaos of construction. The contractor, a gruff man named Bill who had initially questioned whether she could afford his services, now sought her approval on every detail. "The new flooring should be finished by Friday," Bill said, wiping sawdust from his hands. "I have to say, Ms. Rodriguez, your design choices are smart. This place is going to look like a completely different restaurant." Sarah nodded, checking items off her extensive renovation checklist. She had spent countless hours researching restaurant design, studying successful establishments, and learning about everything from optimal table spacing to acoustic considerations. Every decision was deliberate, informed by both research and intuition. Her phone rang, displaying Dr. Martinez's number. "Sarah, I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to check on your progress." "Everything's on schedule, Dr. Martinez. Actually, I wanted to thank you again for connecting me with Chef Williams. He's been invaluable in redesigning the kitchen layout." Chef Williams was a culinary school graduate who had been working at an upscale restaurant downtown but was eager for the opportunity to help build something from the ground up. When Sarah interviewed him, she had been impressed not just by his technical skills, but by his understanding of how food costs, preparation time, and menu psychology all interconnected. "I have some news that might interest you," Dr. Martinez continued. "The City Council is considering a small business recognition program, and I've submitted your restaurant as a candidate. They're particularly interested in stories of local entrepreneurship and community investment." After the call, Sarah walked through the space, visualizing the finished product. The harsh fluorescent lighting would be replaced with warm LED fixtures that could be dimmed for evening dining. The cramped booths would give way to a mix of seating options: intimate tables for couples, larger tables for families, and a community table where solo diners could feel welcome. The most ambitious addition was a small stage area where local musicians could perform on weekend evenings. Sarah had noticed that the neighborhood lacked venues for emerging artists, and she wanted Rodriguez Family Restaurant to become a cultural hub as well as a dining destination. Jenny stopped by that afternoon, carefully navigating the construction debris in her business attire. "This place is unrecognizable already. How are you managing all of this while still working your other job?" Sarah had kept her position at another restaurant to maintain cash flow during the renovation, working nights while overseeing construction during the day. It was exhausting but necessary. I'm not just managing it, Jen. I'm learning from every decision, every mistake, every small victory. When we open, I'll understand this business from the ground up. Speaking of opening, have you thought about marketing? You'll need to let people know about the changes. Sarah smiled and pulled out another folder from her seemingly endless collection of organized documentation. I've been working with a local graphic designer to create a new brand identity. We're also planning a soft opening for friends and family, followed by a grand reopening with special pricing for the first month. Jenny flipped through the marketing materials, her expression shifting from skeptical support to genuine admiration. Sarah, these look professional, really professional. How did you learn to do all this? The same way I learned everything else. Research, observation, and practice. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Gordon from the Tuesday Book Club stood at the construction entrance, looking uncertain. I hope you don't mind me stopping by, dear. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that you were the one who bought this place. Sarah invited her in, carefully guiding her through the safe areas of the construction zone. My goodness, Mrs. Gordon said, taking in the transformation. This is going to be beautiful. You know, the book club ladies and I have been meeting at that chain coffee place since Marcus closed, but it's not the same. We're all hoping you'll have us back. Mrs. Gordon, you and the book club will always be welcome here. In fact, I'm planning to designate Tuesday mornings as community group time, with special pricing for book clubs, knitting circles, and other regular groups. Mrs. Gordon's eyes lit up. That's wonderful. You know, my husband Harold mentioned that the bank is very pleased with how you've handled this transition. It's not often they see such thorough preparation from a first-time business owner. As Mrs. Gordon left, she paused at the door. Sarah, dear, I hope you don't mind an old woman giving advice, but don't let success change who you are. You've always been kind and hardworking. Those qualities will serve you well as a business owner. The following week brought the arrival of the new kitchen equipment. Sarah watched as Chef Williams directed the installation, his excitement evident as he examined each piece. This is a beautiful setup, he said, running his hands along the new prep stations. We'll be able to handle twice the volume of the old kitchen, with better organization and food safety protocols. Tell me about the menu you've been developing, Sarah said, genuinely curious about his creative process. Chef Williams pulled out his notebook, filled with recipe ideas, cost calculations, and presentation sketches. I want to honor the diner tradition while elevating the execution. Comfort food, made with quality ingredients and careful technique. Nothing pretentious, but everything done well. He showed her plans for upgraded versions of classic diner dishes. A burger made with locally sourced beef and house-made pickles, breakfast items featuring farm-fresh eggs and artisanal bread, and daily specials that would showcase seasonal ingredients. The key is balancing food costs with quality, he explained. I've calculated that we can improve the ingredients significantly while keeping menu prices competitive with other local restaurants. Sarah appreciated his business-minded approach to cuisine. This wasn't just about cooking, it was about creating sustainable value for both customers and the business. 2 days before the soft opening, Sarah stood in her completed restaurant as the evening light streamed through the new windows. The transformation was remarkable. The space felt warm, welcoming, and professional. The color scheme of deep blues and warm grays created an atmosphere that was both sophisticated and comfortable. The new furniture had arrived that morning, tables made from reclaimed wood, chairs upholstered in durable but attractive fabric, and booth seating that provided privacy without feeling cramped. The community table near the front window was already drawing attention from passers-by curious about the changes. Patricia arrived as Sarah was doing a final walkthrough, her expression one of pure pride. Honey, this place is stunning. You've created something really special here. I couldn't have done it without your support, Aunt Pat. The loan meant everything, but your belief in me meant even more. You would have found another way, Patricia said confidently. That's who you are. You find solutions when others see only problems. That evening, Sarah hosted a preview dinner for her family, close friends, and the construction crew who had brought her vision to life. The kitchen performed flawlessly, the service flowed smoothly, and the atmosphere was exactly what she had imagined. Dr. Martinez raised his glass during the impromptu celebration. To Sarah Rodriguez, who proves that success isn't about where you start, but about how clearly you can see where you're going. The soft opening the next day brought a steady stream of neighborhood regulars curious about the changes. The Tuesday book club arrived early, claiming their favorite spot near the windows. Former customers from the old diner mixed with new faces drawn by the updated atmosphere and word-of-mouth recommendations. Sarah moved through the dining room, greeting customers, checking on service, and absorbing every detail of how her systems worked in practice. There were minor issues. The coffee machine needed adjustment. One of the new servers struggled with the point-of-sale system, but overall, the operation ran smoothly. Around noon, a familiar figure appeared at the hostess station. The businessman who had dismissed her months earlier stood uncomfortably near the entrance, clearly debating whether to stay or leave. Sarah approached him with a genuine smile. "Welcome to Rodriguez Family Restaurant. Table for one?" He nodded, seemingly unsure how to navigate this role reversal. Sarah seated him at a quiet table and handed him a menu. "The transformation is impressive," he said after a moment. "I have to admit, I didn't think you could pull this off." "I appreciate your honesty," Sarah replied. "What made you change your mind?" "The numbers. I've been watching the property values in this neighborhood, and businesses like this one are part of what's driving the increase. You identified an opportunity that I missed completely." He paused, looking around the bustling restaurant. "I owe you an apology. I made assumptions based on limited information, and I was wrong." Sarah considered his words carefully. "Apology accepted. We all have blind spots. The important thing is learning from them." As the lunch rush picked up, Sarah watched her team work with growing confidence. Chef Williams expedited orders with calm efficiency, the servers found their rhythm with the new layout, and customers lingered over their meals, clearly enjoying both the food and the atmosphere. During a brief lull, Jenny appeared with a local food blogger in tow. "Sarah, this is Amanda Chen from the Neighborhood Eats blog. She heard about the reopening and wanted to try the food." Amanda was a young woman with an obvious passion for discovering hidden culinary gems. She ordered a sampling of menu items and spent considerable time talking with both Sarah and Chef Williams about their approach to elevated comfort food. "The community table concept is brilliant," Amanda said as she prepared to leave. "It addresses something missing in this neighborhood, a place where people can feel comfortable dining alone or meeting new people." That afternoon brought another surprise visitor. Marcus appeared at the entrance, looking around with an expression of wonder and perhaps a touch of regret. "Sarah, this is incredible. I barely recognize the place." "Marcus, I'm glad you stopped by. How are you settling into your new situation?" "Good, actually. I'm managing a small restaurant in Phoenix. Smaller operation, less stress. Turns out I'm better as a manager than an owner." He paused, studying the bustling dining room. "You've accomplished something here that I never could have." "We each have our strengths," Sarah said diplomatically. "I learned a lot from watching you handle the daily challenges of restaurant ownership." As Marcus left, Sarah reflected on how different their definitions of success had been. Marcus had seen the restaurant as a burden to be endured. Sarah saw it as a canvas for her vision. The grand reopening celebration took place on a Saturday evening, 3 weeks later. The local paper ran a feature story about Sarah's journey from waitress to owner, and the mayor even stopped by to offer official congratulations. The restaurant was packed with customers, supporters, and curious neighbors drawn by the festive atmosphere. Chef Williams had prepared special dishes for the celebration, and local musicians performed on the new stage area. The evening felt like a community celebration, rather than just a business opening. As the evening wound down, Sarah stood behind the bar, watching the last customers finish their desserts and coffee. The cash register showed the best single-day sales in the restaurant's history, but more importantly, the energy in the room was exactly what she had envisioned when she first imagined transforming this space. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Martinez. "Saw the news coverage online. The City Council voted to feature Rodriguez Family Restaurant in their Small Business Success Program. You're officially a case study in local entrepreneurship." Sarah smiled, thinking about how dramatically her life had changed in less than a year. She was no longer the waitress who dreamed of understanding business. She was a business owner who happened to have started as a waitress. The distinction mattered because it represented a fundamental shift in how she saw herself and how others saw her. The businessman's words from that first dismissive encounter echoed in her memory. Some people just don't know their place. He had been right, Sarah realized. She hadn't known her place because her place wasn't a fixed point on someone else's map. Her place was wherever her vision, determination, and hard work could take her. As she locked up her restaurant that night, Sarah looked at the small bronze plaque she had installed near the entrance earlier that day. It read simply, "Rodriguez Family Restaurant, established 2025 where everyone belongs." It was more than a business slogan. It was a statement of values that reflected her own journey from being underestimated to becoming unstoppable. The plaque would remind every customer that they too had the potential to exceed others' expectations of what they could achieve. But more than that, it would remind Sarah herself that buying the restaurant wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning of building something that would outlast any single person's assumptions about what was possible. 6 months after the grand reopening, Rodriguez Family Restaurant had become a cornerstone of the neighborhood. The morning rush brought a steady stream of commuters grabbing coffee and pastries, while lunch attracted both business meetings and casual diners. But it was the evening service that truly set the restaurant apart, with live music 3 nights a week and a dinner menu that had earned recognition from the city's food critics. Sarah arrived early each morning, a habit she'd maintained since her waitressing days, but now she came to review sales reports, plan inventory, and coordinate with her growing team. The restaurant employed 12 people now, including 2 full-time servers, 3 kitchen staff, and a part-time bookkeeper who helped manage the increasingly complex financial aspects of the business. "Morning, Sarah," called Maria, one of the servers, as she arrived for the opening shift. "Did you see the review in Metro Weekly?" Sarah had indeed seen the review, a glowing piece that praised not just the food but the restaurant's atmosphere and community focus. The critic had particularly noted the Tuesday book clubs, the Thursday open mic nights, and the Sunday family brunches that had become neighborhood traditions. "It's good press," Sarah replied, "but more importantly, it means we're achieving what we set out to do, creating a space where people want to spend time." The morning brought its usual mix of regulars and newcomers. Mrs. Gordon's book club had expanded to include 6 women, and they'd started recommending the restaurant to their friends and family. The community table had become so popular that Sarah was considering adding a second one near the back of the dining room. Around 10 o'clock, an unexpected visitor appeared, a woman in an expensive business suit carrying a leather portfolio. "Ms. Rodriguez? I'm Victoria Chang from Metropolitan Restaurant Group. I was wondering if we could talk." Sarah had heard of Metropolitan Restaurant Group. They owned a chain of upscale casual dining establishments throughout the region. She invited Victoria to sit at a quiet corner table. "I'll get straight to the point," Victoria said, opening her portfolio. "We've been monitoring your success here, and we're interested in partnering with you to expand the Rodriguez family restaurant concept. We're prepared to offer you a franchise opportunity that could put your restaurants in 5 additional locations within 2 years." Sarah listened as Victoria outlined their proposal. Metropolitan would provide funding, site selection, and operational support in exchange for a majority stake in the expanded enterprise. The financial projections were impressive, showing potential revenues that dwarfed anything Sarah had imagined when she first bought the restaurant. "It's an interesting proposal," Sarah said carefully. "Can I ask what specifically attracted your attention?" "Your customer retention rates are exceptional, your labor costs are well controlled, and you've created a brand identity that resonates with multiple demographic segments. Frankly, it's a textbook example of successful community-based restaurant development." Victoria left her card and a formal proposal, encouraging Sarah to review it with her attorney and accountant. As she walked away, Sarah found herself facing a dilemma she hadn't anticipated. Success had brought opportunities she wasn't sure she wanted. That afternoon, she called Patricia to discuss the offer. "It sounds like a significant opportunity," Patricia said after Sarah explained the proposal. "But you don't sound excited about it." I'm not sure I am. When I bought this place, it wasn't about building a restaurant empire. It was about proving I could succeed and creating something meaningful for this community. There's no rule that says you have to accept every opportunity that comes along, honey. Success gives you choices, not obligations. Sarah spent the evening walking through her restaurant during the dinner service, observing the interactions between staff and customers, the conversations happening at various tables, and the overall energy of the space. A group of local high school students had claimed a large table where they were studying together while sharing appetizers. An elderly man sat at the community table, engaged in animated conversation with a young couple about local history. Two women celebrated a birthday with Chef William's signature chocolate cake. These moments weren't just transactions, they were connections, memories being formed, and community being built. The thought of replicating this across multiple locations felt both exciting and somehow hollow. The next morning brought another surprise. Dr. Martinez called with news that the local community college wanted to discuss having Sarah speak to their business students about entrepreneurship. They're particularly interested in your approach to market research and customer relationship building, he explained. Many of their students work in service industries and are curious about paths to business ownership. Sarah agreed to the speaking engagement, partly out of gratitude to Dr. Martinez, and partly because she remembered how hungry she had been for examples of people who had succeeded despite unconventional backgrounds. The following week, she stood before a classroom of 25 students, many of whom looked remarkably like she had 2 years earlier, young people working service jobs while trying to figure out their futures. How many of you work in restaurants, retail, or other service positions? Sarah asked. Nearly every hand went up. I want you to remember that your current job isn't a limitation, it's an education. Every customer interaction teaches you about human psychology. Every shift teaches you about operations management. Every difficult day teaches you about problem-solving under pressure. A young woman in the front row raised her hand. But how do you get people to take you seriously when they see you as just a server or just a retail worker? By becoming undeniably competent, Sarah replied. I spent 2 years learning everything I could about business while working as a waitress. When I finally made my move, my knowledge and preparation spoke louder than anyone's preconceptions. After the presentation, several students approached her with specific questions about business planning, financing, and industry knowledge. Sarah found herself energized by their curiosity and determination. One student, a young man named David, who worked at a local coffee shop, was particularly thoughtful in his questions. Ms. Rodriguez, what do you do when people try to discourage you by saying the restaurant business is too risky? You acknowledge that they're not wrong about the risks, Sarah said. Restaurant failure rates are high. But you also recognize that risk can be managed through preparation, research, and careful execution. The question isn't whether there's risk, it's whether you're prepared to handle that risk intelligently. Driving back to the restaurant, Sarah reflected on how much her perspective had shifted. A year ago, she had been focused entirely on proving herself capable. Now, she was thinking about how to use her success to help others see their own potential. The restaurant was busy when she returned, with Chef Williams training a new prep cook and the dinner servers setting up for the evening service. Sarah moved through the kitchen, checking on preparations and discussing the evening specials. Sarah, Chef Williams said, pulling her aside, I've been thinking about that franchise proposal. Have you made a decision? Still considering it. What's your take? Honestly, I think you'd lose what makes this place special. The community connections? The personal relationships with customers? The ability to make decisions based on what's right for this neighborhood rather than what's right for corporate profits. His words resonated with Sarah's own instincts. The franchise opportunity represented financial success, but it might compromise the values that had driven her initial success. That evening, as the dinner rush was winding down, Sarah noticed a commotion at one of the corner tables. A customer was loudly complaining about his meal, his voice carrying across the dining room and clearly making other diners uncomfortable. Sarah approached the table with calm professionalism. Good evening, sir. I'm Sarah Rodriguez, the owner. I understand you're having concerns about your meal? This food is completely unacceptable, the man said, his voice still unnecessarily loud. I've eaten at restaurants all over the world, and this is amateur hour cooking. I demand to speak to whoever's responsible for this disaster." Sarah glanced at the barely touched plate in front of him, one of Chef William's most popular dishes that had received consistent praise from customers and critics alike. "I'm responsible, sir. This is my restaurant. Can you tell me specifically what you found problematic about the dish?" The man launched into a tirade about seasoning, presentation, and cooking technique that revealed more about his desire to assert dominance than any legitimate concerns about the food. Sarah listened patiently, aware that other customers were watching how she handled the situation. "I understand your disappointment," Sarah said when he finished. "Let me have the kitchen prepare something different for you, and of course there will be no charge for either dish." "That's not sufficient," the man replied. "I want compensation for this entire evening being ruined." Sarah felt a familiar sensation, the same dismissive energy she had encountered from people who assumed they could intimidate her based on their perceived superior status. But now, standing in her own restaurant, she felt no need to accommodate unreasonable demands. "Sir, I've offered to replace your meal at no charge, which I believe is a fair resolution. If that's not acceptable, I'll be happy to call you a taxi so you can find a restaurant that better meets your expectations." The man's face reddened. "Do you know who I am? I could destroy this place with one phone call." "I'm sure you're very important," Sarah replied calmly, "but threatening my business won't improve your dining experience. Would you like me to call that taxi?" Realizing he had lost his audience, other customers were now openly disapproving of his behavior. The man threw his napkin on the table and stormed out. As the door closed behind him, spontaneous applause broke out from several tables. Mrs. Gordon, who had witnessed the entire exchange, nodded approvingly at Sarah. "That was beautifully handled, dear. Some people think they can treat service workers badly because they've never been held accountable for their behavior." The incident reminded Sarah of how much her relationship with conflict had changed. A year ago, she would have absorbed that man's aggression and found ways to blame herself for his dissatisfaction. Now, she recognized manipulative behavior and refused to enable it. The next morning brought a call from Victoria Chang, following up on the franchise proposal. "Sarah, I hope you've had time to review our offer. I wanted to emphasize that this opportunity won't remain open indefinitely. We have other candidates interested in expanding their concepts with us." "I appreciate the follow-up, Victoria. I've decided to decline your offer." The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. "May I ask why?" "The financial projections show significant growth potential." "Because growth for its own sake isn't my goal. I'm building something sustainable here, something that serves my community. Franchising would change the fundamental nature of what I'm trying to accomplish." "You're making a mistake, Sarah. This neighborhood won't support the kind of revenues you could generate with multiple locations." "Maybe not, but it supports the kind of business I want to run." After hanging up, Sarah felt a sense of relief she hadn't expected. The franchise opportunity had represented validation from the business establishment, but accepting it would have meant compromising her vision for external approval. 2 weeks later, Sarah received an unexpected call from a reporter at the city's main newspaper. The reporter was working on a feature story about women entrepreneurs and wanted to include Sarah's story. "What interests me," the reporter said during their interview, "is that you turned down a significant expansion opportunity. That's unusual in today's business climate." "Success means different things to different people," Sarah explained. "For me, it means building something sustainable that creates value for my community, provides good jobs for my employees, and allows me to continue growing as a business owner and a person. Some people might see turning down that opportunity as limiting your potential. I see it as defining my potential on my own terms rather than someone else's." The newspaper feature ran the following Sunday, with a photo of Sarah in her restaurant and a headline that read, "Local entrepreneur chooses community over corporate growth." The article generated significant local interest, with several other small business owners reaching out to share their own stories of choosing sustainable growth over rapid expansion. One of those business owners was Elena Vasquez, who owned a successful catering company and had read about Sarah's approach to community-focused business development. "I've been looking for someone to partner with on a project," Elena explained over coffee at the restaurant. "The city is renovating the old community center, and they're looking for food service partners for events and programs. I think our businesses could complement each other perfectly. Elena's proposal was intriguing, a partnership that would allow Rodriguez's family restaurant to cater community events while helping Elena's company expand into restaurant-style service for larger gatherings. Unlike the franchise opportunity, this partnership felt aligned with Sarah's values and goals. What would the arrangement look like practically? Sarah asked. Shared catering contracts, joint menu development for special events, and cross-promotion between our customer bases. You'd maintain complete control over your restaurant while expanding into event catering, and I'd gain access to a professional kitchen space for larger orders. Sarah found herself genuinely excited about this opportunity. It represented growth that enhanced rather than compromised her core business, and it connected her restaurant more deeply with community institutions. They spent the following weeks developing a formal partnership agreement, with both businesses maintaining their independence while collaborating on specific projects. The first joint event was a catering contract for the community center's reopening celebration, serving 300 people with a menu that showcased both Elena's event expertise and Chef William's creative adaptations of the restaurant's signature dishes. The event was a tremendous success, leading to additional catering contracts and increased visibility for both businesses. More importantly, it demonstrated that strategic partnerships could create growth opportunities that aligned with Sarah's values, rather than compromising them. As summer approached, Sarah found herself reflecting on how much had changed since she first bought the restaurant. The financial success exceeded her initial projections, but the personal satisfaction came from seeing how the restaurant had become woven into the fabric of the neighborhood. The Tuesday book club had spawned a Thursday evening philosophy discussion group and a Saturday morning writer's workshop. Local artists displayed their work on the restaurant's walls, with pieces rotating monthly and sales benefiting both the artists and a local arts education program. The community table had become an informal networking hub where freelancers, small business owners, and remote workers gathered to work and connect. "You've created something really special here," Jenny said during one of her regular visits. "I have to admit, when you first told me you wanted to buy this place, I thought you were making a huge mistake. What changed your mind?" "Watching you turn it into exactly what you said you would. You didn't just buy a restaurant, you created a community institution." That evening, as Sarah was reviewing the day's receipts and planning the following week's schedule, she received a call from an unexpected source, the businessman who had dismissed her so condescendingly during her waitressing days. "Ms. Rodriguez, this is James Morton. I don't know if you remember me, but I was a customer at the old Miller's Diner." "I remember you, Mr. Morton. What can I do for you?" "I'm calling because I owe you a significant apology. My behavior that day was inexcusable, and your success has made me reconsider some assumptions I didn't even realize I was making." Sarah was surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "I appreciate you calling, Mr. Morton. I'm actually calling for another reason as well. I work with a group that provides mentorship and funding for entrepreneurs from non-traditional backgrounds. I was hoping you might consider joining our advisory board. Your story and insights could be valuable for other people trying to make similar transitions." The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. The man who had once dismissed her potential was now asking her to help identify and develop potential in others. "Send me some information about the organization," Sarah said. "I'm interested in learning more." As autumn arrived, the restaurant celebrated its first anniversary under Sarah's ownership. The celebration was a neighborhood affair, with local politicians, business owners, and longtime customers gathering to recognize what had been accomplished. Dr. Martinez served as the unofficial master of ceremonies, telling the story of Sarah's transformation from student to successful business owner. "Sarah represents something important," he said to the gathered crowd. "She proves that talent and determination exist everywhere, often in places where others aren't looking for them." Patricia spoke about watching her niece navigate challenges and opportunities with wisdom beyond her years. Chef Williams talked about the collaborative approach to menu development that had made the restaurant's culinary reputation. Even Mrs. Gordon said a few words about how the restaurant had become a gathering place that strengthened community connections. Sarah's own remarks were brief but heartfelt. "This restaurant exists because people believed in potential they saw before I fully saw it myself. Tonight, I want to challenge all of us to look for that same potential in others. In the young person taking your order, the student working their way through school, the person whose current circumstances might not reflect their ultimate capabilities. As the evening wound down, Sarah stood in her restaurant, her community hub, her life's work, her proof that limitations existed mainly in other people's imaginations. The path from waitress to owner had been challenging, but it had also been exactly what she needed to become the person she was meant to be. The next morning brought a new opportunity. A call from the local community college asking if she would consider teaching a continuing education course on small business development. "We've had numerous requests from students who attended your presentation," the administrator explained. "There seems to be significant interest in learning from someone who's successfully made the transition from employee to entrepreneur." Sarah found herself saying yes before she had fully considered the implications. Teaching would mean sharing not just her successes but also her struggles, her mistakes, and the unglamorous reality of building a business one decision at a time. The first class session drew 22 students, ranging from college-age workers to middle-aged professionals considering career changes. Sarah began by sharing her own story, but quickly shifted focus to having students assess their own skills, interests, and opportunities. "The most important business skill," she told them, "is the ability to see patterns and opportunities that others miss. This restaurant succeeded not because I had special advantages, but because I paid attention to details that the previous owner ignored." She assigned them homework that might have seemed unconventional in a traditional business class. Spend time observing successful businesses in their daily lives, not as customers but as analysts. Watch how staff interact with customers. Notice how space is utilized. Pay attention to operational flows and inefficiencies. "The world is full of examples of what works and what doesn't," Sarah explained. "Most people don't notice because they're not looking. Your job is to start looking." One student, a woman named Carmen, who worked as a hotel housekeeper, approached Sarah after class with a question that demonstrated she was already thinking like an entrepreneur. "I've noticed that the hotel wastes enormous amounts of barely used toiletries and linens. There has to be a way to capture that value instead of just throwing everything away." "That's exactly the kind of observation that leads to business opportunities," Sarah encouraged. "What have you learned about regulations around reusing hotel amenities? What about partnerships with homeless shelters or other organizations that could use those resources?" Carmen's eyes lit up as she realized Sarah was treating her idea as genuinely viable rather than dismissing it as impractical. These teaching experiences reminded Sarah of her own hunger for validation and encouragement during her transition from employee to owner. She began to see education as another way to create value beyond her restaurant's walls. The winter months brought new challenges and opportunities. The community center partnership had generated enough additional revenue to consider minor expansion within the existing space. Sarah worked with a designer to reconfigure the layout, adding 4 more tables without compromising the intimate atmosphere that customers valued. More significantly, she had begun developing relationships with local farmers and suppliers that allowed her to source ingredients more sustainably while supporting other small businesses. These relationships led to seasonal menu changes that kept longtime customers interested while attracting food enthusiasts drawn to the restaurant's farm-to-table approach. "I never expected to become passionate about supply chain management," Sarah told Elena during one of their weekly partnership planning meetings. "But there's something deeply satisfying about knowing exactly where your ingredients come from and supporting other small business owners in the process." "That's the difference between building a business and building a brand," Elena replied. "You're creating something with values embedded in every decision." As the restaurant's second year began, Sarah found herself thinking less about proving others wrong and more about helping others prove themselves right. The shift reflected her growing confidence, but also her recognition that individual success meant little without broader community impact. The spring brought an invitation to speak at a regional conference on women's entrepreneurship. The audience was larger and more diverse than anything Sarah had experienced, including business school graduates, established entrepreneurs, and women from various industries considering starting their own ventures. "The most dangerous advice anyone ever gave me," Sarah told the audience, "was to know my place." The implication was that my place was fixed, determined by my current circumstances rather than my potential. I want to challenge all of you to reject that limitation, not just for yourselves but for others, whose potential you might be in a position to recognize and nurture. During the question and answer session, a woman in the audience asked about the emotional challenges of business ownership. People talk about the financial risks and operational challenges, the woman said, but what about the psychological pressure of being responsible for other people's livelihoods? Sarah appreciated the thoughtfulness of the question. It's the most serious responsibility I've ever undertaken. Every decision I make affects not just my own success, but the financial security of 12 other people and their families. That responsibility is both overwhelming and motivating. It forces me to think beyond short-term gains and consider the long-term sustainability of everything we do. After the conference, several women approached Sarah with specific business ideas, seeking advice about feasibility, financing, and implementation strategies. She found herself serving as an informal mentor, a role she hadn't sought but discovered she genuinely enjoyed. One of those women was a teacher named Rachel, who had been developing a tutoring service that could serve both struggling students and those seeking academic enrichment. "I have the educational expertise," Rachel explained, "but I'm intimidated by the business side. Marketing, pricing, client management. It all feels overwhelming." What feels overwhelming usually becomes manageable when you break it down into smaller, specific tasks, Sarah replied. Instead of thinking about marketing, think about reaching your first 10 clients. Instead of worrying about pricing strategy, research what similar services charge and test different approaches with early customers. Over the following months, Sarah watched Rachel transform her tutoring concept into a thriving business that served over 50 students and employed 3 additional teachers. The success felt as rewarding as Sarah's own achievements, perhaps because it represented multiplication of impact rather than just personal advancement. The restaurant continued to evolve as well. Chef Williams had developed relationships with culinary students from the local college, offering internships that provided practical experience while bringing fresh energy and ideas to the kitchen. 2 of those interns had been hired as full-time staff, creating a career pipeline that benefited both the restaurant and aspiring chefs. "We're not just running a restaurant anymore," Chef Williams observed during one of their weekly planning meetings. "We're developing talent, supporting local agriculture, providing community space, and probably a dozen other things I haven't thought of." "Is that a problem?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. "Just the opposite. It's what makes this job meaningful instead of just profitable." As summer approached, Sarah received an unexpected call from Victoria Chang, the franchise consultant who had approached her over a year earlier. "Sarah, I wanted to follow up on our previous conversation. Metropolitan Restaurant Group has been observing your continued success, and we're prepared to make a substantially improved offer." "I'm flattered by your continued interest, Victoria, but my position hasn't changed. I'm not interested in franchising." "May I ask what it would take to change your mind? We're talking about potential revenues that could set you up for life." Sarah thought carefully before responding. "Victoria, success isn't just about revenue. It's about creating something sustainable that aligns with your values and contributes to your community. Those aren't things that can be replicated through franchising." "You're limiting your potential, Sarah. Think about the impact you could have with multiple locations." "I am thinking about impact. The impact I'm having right here, with these specific people, in this particular community. That's worth more to me than theoretical revenues from theoretical locations." After the call, Sarah reflected on how consistently her definition of success had diverged from conventional business wisdom. She wasn't opposed to growth, but she was committed to growth that enhanced rather than compromised her core values. That evening, as she walked through the restaurant during the dinner service, Sarah noticed a scene that captured why she had made the choices she had. At the community table, a group of local small business owners were collaborating on a neighborhood improvement project. Nearby, a grandmother was teaching her granddaughter to play chess while they shared dessert. In the corner, 2 of her former students from the community college class were discussing their business plans with the enthusiasm of people who had discovered their own potential. These moments weren't just pleasant, they were the return on investment that mattered most to Sarah. The restaurant had become what she had envisioned, a place where community happened naturally, where people's potential was recognized and nurtured, and where success was measured by contribution rather than just accumulation. As the evening wound down, Sarah found herself thinking about the businessman who had dismissed her ambitions 2 years earlier. His words, "Some people just don't know their place," had been intended as a limitation, but they had actually been prophetic. She hadn't known her place because her place wasn't something to be discovered. It was something to be created. Now, as owner of a successful restaurant, teacher, mentor, and community leader, Sarah understood that knowing your place was less important than defining your place. And her place, it turned out, was wherever she could use her success to help others discover their own potential for success. The restaurant would continue to grow and evolve, but its foundation was solid: a commitment to excellence, community, and the radical idea that potential exists everywhere, waiting for someone with the vision and courage to help it flourish. 2 years into ownership, Sarah's mornings had developed a rhythm that felt both purposeful and peaceful. She arrived at Rodriguez family restaurant by 6:30, before any of her staff, to review the previous night's numbers and plan the day ahead. This quiet time had become sacred to her, an opportunity to connect with her business on a level deeper than operational management. The numbers told a story of steady growth and community integration. Average ticket prices had increased not through arbitrary markup, but through customers' willingness to pay for quality ingredients and exceptional service. Customer retention rates exceeded industry standards, and word-of-mouth recommendations accounted for nearly 60% of new business. But the most meaningful metrics weren't captured in spreadsheets. The restaurant had become a gathering place for celebrations, business meetings, first dates, and family dinners. Local artists held informal exhibitions on the walls. High school students came to study after school, knowing they could order a single coffee and stay for hours without pressure. The community table had facilitated dozens of business partnerships, friendships, and collaborative projects. "Morning, Sarah," called Tom, the early shift prep cook, as he arrived through the back entrance. "Did you see the article in Metro Business Weekly?" Sarah had indeed seen the article, a feature about businesses that were redefining success in the post-pandemic economy. Rodriguez Family Restaurant was highlighted as an example of enterprises that prioritized community impact alongside profitability. "It's good recognition," Sarah replied, "but more importantly, it shows that our approach resonates with people who are thinking about business differently." The morning prep work proceeded with practiced efficiency. Chef Williams had developed systems that allowed the kitchen to handle both restaurant service and the growing catering business with Elena. 2 of the former culinary interns were now full-time employees, and a third was being trained for a supervisory role. Around 9 o'clock, Sarah's phone rang with a call from an unexpected source, a producer from a national television program about small business success stories. "Ms. Rodriguez, we've been following your story through local media coverage and industry publications. We're interested in featuring Rodriguez Family Restaurant in an upcoming episode about entrepreneurs who are building sustainable, community-focused businesses." The producer explained that the show would film over 2 days, capturing both the restaurant's daily operations and Sarah's work with aspiring entrepreneurs through her community college classes and informal mentoring. "What appeals to us about your story," the producer continued, "is that it challenges conventional definitions of business success. You've built something that's both profitable and socially beneficial." Sarah agreed to the filming, recognizing it as an opportunity to share her message with a broader audience while potentially inspiring other people who felt constrained by others' expectations. 2 weeks later, the television crew arrived to document what they called a day in the life of Sarah Rodriguez. The filming began during the morning prep, moved through the lunch rush, and concluded with Sarah's evening class at the community college. The cameras captured moments that had become routine to Sarah but appeared remarkable to outside observers. Her detailed knowledge of regular customers' preferences, the collaborative dynamic between kitchen and service staff, and the seamless integration of restaurant operations with community programming. "What strikes me," the producer said during a break in filming, "is how intentional everything feels. Every decision seems to serve multiple purposes." "That's because every decision does serve multiple purposes," Sarah explained. "When you're building something sustainable, you can't afford to waste energy or resources on activities that only benefit one aspect of your operation." The most compelling footage came from her community college class, where students were presenting business plans they had developed throughout the semester. Carmen, the hotel housekeeper who had identified the waste stream opportunity, presented a detailed proposal for a social enterprise that would collect and redistribute unused hotel amenities to homeless shelters and transitional housing programs. The numbers work, Carmen explained to her classmates, but more importantly, it addresses a real problem while creating value for multiple stakeholders. Another student, David from the coffee shop, had developed a plan for a mobile coffee service that would cater to office buildings without convenient access to quality coffee. His research included detailed analysis of foot traffic patterns, competitive pricing, and operational logistics. "These aren't just class exercises," Sarah told the camera crew. "These are viable business concepts developed by people who understand their markets from ground-level experience." During the final interview segment, the producer asked Sarah about her long-term vision for the restaurant and her broader goals. "5 years from now, I hope Rodriguez Family Restaurant is still serving this community with the same values we have today, but I also hope it's one example among many of businesses that prove you can be both profitable and socially responsible. The real success will be measured by how many other people feel empowered to pursue their own versions of meaningful entrepreneurship." The television episode aired 3 months later, generating more attention than Sarah had anticipated. The restaurant received calls from potential customers planning to visit during trips to the city, business school students requesting informational interviews, and other entrepreneurs seeking advice about community-focused business models. More significantly, the episode prompted an invitation from the state's Economic Development Agency to participate in a task force on small business sustainability and community impact. "We're looking for real-world examples of businesses that create economic value while strengthening communities," explained Dr. Patricia Reynolds, the task force coordinator. "Your restaurant represents exactly the kind of model we want to understand and potentially support through policy initiatives." The task force work connected Sarah with entrepreneurs from across the state who are grappling with similar questions about growth, sustainability, and community responsibility. She met Maria Santos, who had built a successful childcare cooperative in a rural community; James Kim, whose technology consulting firm provided free services to nonprofits while maintaining commercial profitability; and Angela Thompson, who had developed a worker-owned cleaning service that had become the preferred vendor for several major corporations. "What we all seem to have in common," Sarah observed during one task force meeting, "is that we started with communities we wanted to serve, rather than markets we wanted to capture." These connections led to informal collaborations and knowledge sharing that benefited all their businesses. Maria's cooperative model influenced Sarah's thinking about employee ownership and profit sharing. James's approach to pro bono work inspired Sarah to formalize the restaurant's community service initiatives. Angela's experience with worker ownership sparked conversations about long-term succession planning that included her employees. The task force also provided Sarah with a broader perspective on the challenges facing small businesses, particularly those owned by women and people from underrepresented communities. Access to capital remained a significant barrier, but equally challenging were the cultural assumptions that undervalued businesses prioritizing community impact alongside profit maximization. The traditional venture capital model assumes that the highest and best use of any successful business is rapid scaling and eventual exit, Dr. Reynolds explained during one session. But many entrepreneurs want to build something lasting that continues to serve their communities, rather than extracting maximum value for distant investors. This conversation resonated deeply with Sarah's own experience of rejecting franchise opportunities that would have compromised her values for financial gain. She began to see her choices not as individual preferences, but as part of a broader movement toward more sustainable and equitable business models. Meanwhile, the restaurant continued to evolve in response to community needs and opportunities. The partnership with Elena had expanded to include event planning services, allowing them to cater everything from wedding receptions to corporate retreats. Chef Williams had developed relationships with local farms that provided seasonal ingredients while supporting agricultural sustainability. The most significant expansion came when the building next door became available for lease. After careful consideration, Sarah decided to expand into the adjacent space, creating a private dining room that could accommodate larger events while preserving the intimate atmosphere of the original restaurant. This is exactly the kind of growth that makes sense, Patricia observed during the expansion planning. You're responding to actual demand from your existing community rather than chasing speculative markets. The expansion project became a community effort. Local contractors provided competitive bids, and several customers who worked in construction volunteered their expertise during off hours. The Tuesday Book Club helped research furnishing options, while the Thursday evening philosophy group debated the ethical implications of different design choices. I never expected restaurant expansion to become a community organizing project, Sarah laughed during one planning meeting that had attracted 15 volunteers. That's because you've built something that people feel invested in, Mrs. Gordon replied. This isn't just your restaurant anymore, it's our restaurant. We have a stake in its success. The expansion opened 6 months later with a celebration that drew over 200 community members. The private dining room had been designed with flexibility in mind, capable of hosting everything from intimate business meetings to larger celebratory gatherings. More importantly, the expansion had been financed entirely through cash flow, and a modest loan secured by the restaurant's demonstrated profitability. Sarah had avoided the debt burden that had crippled Marcus's ownership while maintaining complete control over the business's direction. You've accomplished something remarkable here, said Harold Gordon, Mrs. Gordon's banker husband, during the expansion celebration. Most restaurant expansions require significant external investment and create financial pressure that compromises operational decisions. You've grown sustainably. The success of the expansion prompted another franchise inquiry, this time from a group that specialized in, quote, socially conscious restaurant concepts. The financial terms were even more attractive than the previous offer, but Sarah's response was immediate and definitive. I appreciate your interest, but franchising would fundamentally change what we're trying to accomplish here. Our success comes from deep community relationships that can't be replicated through standardized operations. This rejection prompted a conversation with her staff about long-term planning and ownership structure. Several employees had been with the restaurant since early in Sarah's ownership, and she wanted to ensure they shared in its continued success. I've been thinking about implementing a profit-sharing program, Sarah announced during a staff meeting. Not just end-of-year bonuses, but a formal structure that gives everyone a stake in our continued growth. The proposal generated enthusiasm and thoughtful questions about how such a program would work in practice. Chef Williams had experience with employee ownership models from his culinary school training, while Maria, the senior server, had worked at a restaurant in California that operated as a worker cooperative. What interests me most, said David, one of the newer servers, is how this aligns with everything else we do here. It's consistent with treating people as contributors, rather than just employees. Over the following months, Sarah worked with an attorney who specialized in alternative business structures to develop a profit-sharing plan that would vest employees based on tenure and performance, while maintaining her ultimate decision-making authority. The plan was implemented at the beginning of the restaurant's 3rd year under her ownership. Each eligible employee would receive a percentage of annual profits based on their role and length of service, with the percentages increasing over time. This isn't just about money, Sarah explained during the announcement meeting. It's about recognizing that our success depends on everyone's contributions and ensuring that everyone benefits from our continued growth. The profit-sharing implementation coincided with Sarah's appointment to the board of directors for the local Small Business Association. The position provided her with influence over policies affecting entrepreneurs throughout the region, while connecting her with established business leaders who were increasingly interested in sustainable business models. Your story resonates with a lot of people who are questioning traditional approaches to business success, explained Robert Chen, the association's president. We're seeing more entrepreneurs who want to build something meaningful rather than just profitable. The board position also gave Sarah a platform to advocate for policies that supported community-focused businesses, simplified permit processes for small expansions, tax incentives for businesses that hired locally, and funding programs for entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities. The biggest barriers to sustainable small business development aren't technical, Sarah argued during one board meeting. They're cultural assumptions about what business success should look like and who's capable of achieving it. Her advocacy work attracted attention from academic researchers studying entrepreneurship and community development. Dr. Martinez connected her with colleagues at the state university who were documenting innovative business models that challenged conventional wisdom about growth and sustainability. "Your restaurant has become a case study," Dr. Martinez explained during one of their regular check-ins. "Business schools are using your story to illustrate alternative approaches to scaling and success metrics." This academic interest led to speaking opportunities at business schools throughout the region. Sarah found herself addressing MBA students who were hungry for examples of entrepreneurs who had succeeded without compromising their values. "The most important question you can ask yourself," she told one class, "isn't, how can I maximize profits, but what kind of impact do I want to have, and how can I build a sustainable business that creates that impact?" During the question and answer sessions, students consistently asked about the financial trade-offs involved in prioritizing community impact over rapid growth. "That question assumes these are competing priorities," Sarah replied. "In my experience, community focus has enhanced rather than limited our financial success. Our customers are more loyal, our employees are more engaged, and our operating costs are lower because we've built relationships based on mutual value creation." One student, a woman preparing to graduate with significant debt and family financial pressures, asked how someone in her position could afford to prioritize values over immediate financial returns. "I understand that pressure," Sarah acknowledged. "I started with $47,000 in savings and the knowledge that failure would have serious consequences for me and my family. But I also recognized that short-term thinking would ultimately limit my long-term success." Building something sustainable required patience and strategic thinking, but it also provided security that quick profits couldn't match. These conversations reminded Sarah of her own journey from financial insecurity to business ownership. She began developing a more formal mentoring program that would provide structured support for aspiring entrepreneurs who were navigating similar challenges. The mentoring program launched as a partnership between Rodriguez Family Restaurant and the community college, offering monthly workshops on business development topics combined with individual coaching sessions for participants with specific business concepts. The first cohort included 12 participants ranging from college students to mid-career professionals considering entrepreneurial transitions. Carmen had completed her social enterprise launch and was now serving as a peer mentor. David had successfully launched his mobile coffee service and was exploring expansion opportunities. "What I appreciate about this program," said Lisa Chen, a participant who was developing a sustainable fashion consulting business, "is that it addresses both the practical aspects of business development and the psychological challenges of believing in your own potential." The mentoring program attracted participants from throughout the metropolitan area, with some traveling significant distances to attend monthly sessions. Word-of-mouth recommendations led to a waiting list for the following cohort, prompting Sarah to consider expanding the program's capacity. "We're clearly addressing an unmet need," she told Elena during one of their partnership planning meetings. "There's hunger for business education that goes beyond just financial projections and market analysis." Elena had been observing the mentoring program's development with interest, recognizing parallels to her own experience as a woman entrepreneur in a traditionally male-dominated industry. "What you're providing is something I didn't have when I started my business," Elena observed. "Role models who demonstrate that success is possible without compromising your values or your connection to community." The mentoring program's success prompted inquiries from other communities interested in replicating the model. Sarah received calls from small business associations, community colleges, and economic development organizations asking about curriculum, structure, and implementation strategies. "We never intended to become a business education organization," Sarah laughed during a staff meeting where they were discussing the program's growing influence. "We just wanted to help people who reminded us of ourselves." "Maybe that's exactly why it works so well," replied Chef Williams. "It's based on real experience rather than theoretical knowledge." As the restaurant entered its fourth year under Sarah's ownership, the expansion of activities beyond food service had created both opportunities and challenges. The mentoring program, community events, and advocacy work were meaningful but time-intensive, requiring careful balance with operational management. Sarah found herself facing questions about delegation and organizational structure that she had never anticipated when she first bought the restaurant. "You're at a decision point," Patricia observed during one of their regular conversations. "You can continue trying to personally manage every aspect of the business, or you can develop systems and people that allow you to focus on the areas where you add the most value." This conversation prompted Sarah to reassess her role and responsibilities. While she enjoyed the hands-on aspects of restaurant management, her unique contributions increasingly centered on vision, community relationships, and strategic planning. She began working with a business consultant who specialized in helping entrepreneurs transition from operational to strategic leadership. The process involved analyzing how she spent her time, identifying which activities only she could perform, and developing succession plans for operational responsibilities. "The goal isn't to remove yourself from day-to-day operations," the consultant explained, "but to ensure that your time is focused on activities that create the most value for your business and community." The analysis revealed that Sarah's most valuable contributions were strategic planning, community relationship building, and staff development. Her least valuable activities were routine operational tasks that could be performed equally well by trained staff members. Over the following months, she began delegating more operational responsibility to her experienced team members. Chef Williams assumed greater authority over menu development and kitchen management. Maria took on scheduling and training responsibilities for the service staff. The bookkeeper's role expanded to include financial analysis and reporting. "I was initially worried that delegation meant losing control," Sarah reflected during a mentoring program session. "But what I've discovered is that delegation actually increases control by ensuring that important decisions are made by people with relevant expertise and sufficient time to consider them carefully." The transition to more strategic leadership allowed Sarah to focus more attention on the mentoring program and advocacy work. She partnered with the state university to develop a research project documenting the economic impact of community-focused businesses, providing data that could inform policy discussions about small business support. The research project attracted funding from a foundation interested in community economic development, allowing Sarah to hire a part-time coordinator for the mentoring program and expand its reach to serve participants from rural communities through online components. "What we're building here goes beyond any single business," Sarah told the foundation program officer during a site visit. "We're demonstrating that sustainable prosperity is possible when businesses view themselves as community assets rather than just profit-generating entities." The foundation partnership led to invitations to speak at national conferences on entrepreneurship and community development. Sarah found herself addressing audiences of policymakers, researchers, and entrepreneurs who were grappling with questions about economic inequality, business sustainability, and community resilience. The traditional model of economic development assumes that business success requires extracting value from communities to benefit distant investors, she told one conference audience. "But our experience demonstrates that businesses can create more value by embedding themselves deeply in communities and viewing local prosperity as the foundation for long-term success." These speaking opportunities connected Sarah with entrepreneurs throughout the country who were building similar models of community-focused business development. She learned about urban agriculture operations in Detroit, worker-owned manufacturing cooperatives in North Carolina, and technology companies in California that had rejected venture capital in favor of sustainable growth models. "There's a movement happening," said Marcus Williams, a social entrepreneur from Portland, who had built a successful network of community-owned renewable energy projects. "More people are recognizing that the choice between financial success and social impact is a false dilemma." These connections led to the formation of an informal network of regenerative entrepreneurs who shared resources, strategies, and moral support for building businesses that strengthened rather than extracted from their communities. The network organized an annual conference that rotated between member cities, providing opportunities for in-depth collaboration and learning. Rodriguez Family Restaurant hosted the third annual gathering, with participants staying at local hotels, eating at community restaurants, and visiting other local businesses to observe different approaches to community-focused entrepreneurship. "This conference demonstrates something important about your model," observed Dr. Angela Rodriguez, a business school professor who was documenting the regenerative entrepreneurship movement. Success creates opportunities to lift up others, rather than just accumulating individual wealth. The conference generated local media attention that highlighted not just Rodriguez Family Restaurant but the broader ecosystem of community-focused businesses throughout the region. The coverage attracted visitors from other cities who wanted to observe this approach to economic development in practice. We're becoming a destination for people who want to see what community-centered business development looks like, Sarah told her staff during a planning meeting. That's both an opportunity and a responsibility. The increased visibility brought new opportunities but also new pressures. A major restaurant chain inquired about acquiring Rodriguez Family Restaurant as part of their authentic local dining portfolio. A prestigious business school invited Sarah to consider a visiting professorship. A publisher approached her about writing a book documenting her journey and philosophy. Each opportunity required careful consideration of alignment with her values and long-term goals. The restaurant chain acquisition would provide financial security, but compromise the community relationships that made the business meaningful. The academic position would allow her to influence business education, but might require relocating away from the community she had spent years serving. The book project could amplify her message, but would require time and energy that might be better spent on direct community impact. Success creates choices, Sarah reflected during a mentoring program session, but not all choices that are available are choices that are worth making. After careful consideration, she declined the acquisition offer, negotiated a part-time consulting arrangement with the business school that allowed her to maintain her restaurant operations, and agreed to collaborate on the book project with a co-author who could handle much of the writing while ensuring her voice and message remained authentic. What I've learned, she told her staff while announcing these decisions, is that staying true to your original purpose becomes more important, not less important, as you become more successful. The book project, titled Beyond the Bottom Line, Building Businesses That Serve Communities, was published 18 months later to positive reviews and steady sales. More importantly, it generated correspondence from entrepreneurs around the world who were implementing similar approaches in their own contexts. Your story validates something I've been thinking about for years, wrote Maria Santos, an entrepreneur in Spain who is developing a network of worker-owned restaurants. Business can be a force for community building rather than community extraction. Sarah sat in her restaurant office, reading through dozens of similar letters from people in countries she had never visited, all sharing their own stories of building businesses that served their communities while proving wrong those who had underestimated them. A former housekeeper in Manila had started a cleaning cooperative. A server in London had bought the pub where she worked. A dishwasher in Toronto was opening his own catering company. As the afternoon light streamed through her office window, Sarah could hear the familiar sounds of her restaurant preparing for the dinner service. The community table was occupied by a group of local entrepreneurs planning a neighborhood festival. The Tuesday Book Club was finishing their weekly meeting with animated discussion about their latest selection. Chef Williams was training a new intern who reminded Sarah of herself 5 years ago, hungry, determined, and underestimated by almost everyone except the person who mattered most. Sarah closed the laptop containing the morning's correspondence and walked into her restaurant, watching the organized chaos of another successful day in a business that had started as one woman's refusal to accept other people's limitations. She had proved them all wrong, but more importantly, she had created a blueprint that was helping others around the world prove their doubters wrong too. They had said she would never be more than a waitress. Instead, she had bought the restaurant, transformed her community, and written the book that was inspiring a global movement of entrepreneurs who understood that the most powerful business strategy was simply refusing to stay in the place where others expected them to remain. The end.